national popular vote encourages, oh yeah, you want to think
Does
about
that mean then we're not going to say anything about the intent? Because that's what this statement is.
encouraging, yeah.
It's a statement of intent.
Well, maybe this, could this be one where we would say, you know, what,
There's disagreement.
what the majority or minority opinion was, or,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, what I can do is I'll write up all of these into a document, and then I can pass it around to everyone who's a member of the group, and if we want to keep one, and you know, we can have some in here, you know, I don't mind having things in here that have a minority voice too, so if people want a minority perspective in here, you know, that's fine, so, or, you know, we want to raise the issues that we want people to consider in the legislative process. And so, you know, we can pass it around and people can vote, and we can have, you know, we can say who voted for who, because those are cues to people too. I mean, Paul's not going to sign on to it. My guess is that's a cue to Republican legislators about that perspective.
I don't know if that's it. But, Lynn, what do you think?
Is that an agreeable process to people?
And I got
And do people want their names associated with particular perspectives? Do you feel comfortable with that?
I usually lay it out there.
regardless of where
You're
it's
okay?
Probably not
Okay.
gonna bother me in the end.
Okay, all right, then I'll do that. I'll do it, and then we'll have like I'll create like a little vote thing, and you'll just put your name and who you voted, and there'll be a little survey, and you'll go through each one and say whether you support it or not. But I'd like to tweak these so that there's, you know, I'd like to tweak these and get everybody's perspective in, so that they're worded in a way that people feel comfortable with. So I don't want to just say, okay, well, I'll just send them out. So I do want to have some discussion about these. So I'll include this, and we'll change the wording to make it more male too. And this we may want to change too, given our discussion. National popular vote encourages more national level campaigning instead of state-based campaigning. Yeah.
I still think the state is going to be the unit that any campaign will use, because we've got state parties. And you really, I mean, the RNC, they don't really put out their own stuff, and they'll put out some really high-level pieces, but they're not a campaign. It's not one size fits all in a lot of, so you're still going to have the country sector in some fashion. You have to maintain, I mean, all politics are local, right?
So would it
You're gonna have
expand the
people-
number of competitive areas?
It might, I mean, but that's altogether different than what.
But I think that's the essence of what I was trying to capture. So I mean, I just sort of went through our stuff and tried to capture.
Well, you can't say
different
more
parts of it.
competitive campaigning, because that's what they call it, redundant.
Lana,
Yes.
what if, I think I know what you're trying to get at, and what if you talk more about how campaigns might tailor more towards the individual rather than, because, I mean, the concept of national popular vote is moving it from a block of state allocated votes down to a majority of individual votes, right? And we've talked about how the campaign would maybe reach out more to the individual and its targeting. Now, whether or not it still uses the state campaign mechanism to do that, I agree with Paul. I think it probably will, but I think the point is right that the campaign is going to go down to a level we think, or possibly say, a more individual level of appeal. And maybe that's more what we're trying to get at here.
So she's saying encourages targeting individuals versus states.
Really,
Well,
Yeah.
the word encourage puts a positive spin on doing that. And I wonder if it'd be better to do something like replace encourages with may result in more national level campaigning, for some more neutral group.
Okay.
see, any D legislator or R legislator who sees that and then goes talk to their people, and they'll see that this may result in less money, to their state parties, it's just going to freak out. Because when you go to a national level campaign, you're not helping your state-based market. I mean, and we're 50 of us. And I just think that's not the best way to sell this, again, to be devil's advocate.
So what language would you use?
Well, I'm not gonna help you sell it necessarily, but I'm just saying that if you're pitching it on a national level, you're not playing to the state-based legislators that are gonna vote on this. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Because you're taking money out of their pocket.
But if it was crafted to say, it might allow national campaigning to groups such as Hispanics and Native Americans, now you've got New Mexico's attention.
Yeah.
So allow greater campaigning?
I was gonna go where you just were as well. I don't think it encourages more national campaigning, I think it encourages more targeted campaigning nationally.
Yes.
So I would go into Texas, or Anthony.
Speak
Hispanic. Love to see it.
Yeah, habla español.
I would work that Hispanic population. So I mean, as Paul said, there's enough money in the world to do a national campaign, but there's enough money in the world to target sectors of the United States on a national basis.
I like that.
I like it too.
I just don't think, I don't think that all those groups are necessarily monolithic. So, I may disagree with the targeting of certain groups. I would hope that campaigns try to cut across some of those things. But
It would be allow a targeted campaign nationally, so we wouldn't necessarily, we could have a subcategory that says something about, Hispanics and blacks in the slides that Kim presented, showing how they're distributed across the population. And the point that I was trying to make with this slide underneath it is really that only a few states get attention now, and that theoretically more voters would be involved in the campain under an NPV plan. So that's really.
Well,
what
that's
I'm
why
trying-
Maggie uses the word
California, New York,
individual.
and Texas would definitely matter under the system. So that's at least a 3-state expansion and 50% of the Latino population. Now, who's targeting them, I'm not, it's not a given which party will target them or how they'll target them. It's just a matter of being targeted at all. So right
That's
now,
what I'm trying to do.
no one in Texas, California, or New York is targeted, and we could pretty much with, I think, complete certainty say under the system, at least those 3 states would matter or would be targeted. Because they just have too many people not to be.
So how do we phrase it?
I don't know if you can put it just with those 3 states, but. the
But I'm
point is
saying that
taken. That's
it
exactly
proves
right.
that there is an expansion. That I think without a
That's what
doubt, there would
I'm
at least be an expansion there would be some type of expansion, and that's an expansion to 25 million voters or 30 million voters. I mean, that's a lot of people. The population between California, Texas, and Florida is huge.
So more voters would, I don't know, this isn't quite right, so I'll have to work on this, more voters would hear the campaign than under the current system. Or,
just don't know that to be true. A lot of this is you hope that it's true, right?
they have to spend those dollars
But,
somewhere.
I guess the only person missing here is a presidential candidate or his or her campaign manager who can tell us, boy, this is what I would do in a situation like this. So,
I'm not sure they know yet.
yeah,
I
I don't know
I don't think
yet. But
they do either.
I just don't see them rolling out a national campaign. Sure you have a platform, you hit certain
And
things.
let's not, we're not gonna say that.
But whether it's national level or targeting individuals or whatever else, it's still done on a state by state basis. And maybe we're trying to change that, I don't know.
How about targeted more individuals across more states?
How about potentially increases the level of
Campaign?
interest by campaigns in individuals versus states? That may not be
Okay.
fair.
We'll work on a wording that is trying to embody this.
I think, isn't that the word you used, Maggie, individuals?
You,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the best way to phrase it,
but how do you, if you look at a practical sort of campaign event, the president shows up and there's a congressman there and maybe some. If you have a national or a targeted campaign that's at odds with what's going on in that state, well, those three people are not going to be on a podium together. It's just you got to look at the reality of what a campaign is. You usually don't have campaign appearances where the three people are really at odds over certain things. So a lot of this is still going to be state-based.
What was the Southern strategy? Who was that?
Nixon.
Nixon. That to me is not state-based, it's region-based.
Right.
It's more, it's not ethnic, but it's kind of ethnic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's addressing a region as an entity.
Well, maybe regions were.
Well, but I don't know that regions work, particularly given the information that we got from Kim, which is you've got how many, I don't know what the numbers are, but in certain places there various ethnic groups are spread around, and under the current system, they may not be heard as a group. Yet if you transition to a national approach to this, then one can target the group as a national body. So, anyway, I hear what you're saying about states, but I think there is a history of approaching it from other ways. The party funding may still be state-based, but it can't, when I say funding, meaning from like an RNC or an
If I'm a
RCCC.
state-based party person, why do I want my presidential candidate at odds with all my other, candidates in my state? I mean, it doesn't, if you're trying to sell this, I mean, you're only focusing on the president here. You're not focusing on the effect on every other elected official, in a state. And
But that happens, I mean, we see that now.
Why are they at odds? I don't
I'm
understand why
saying
they're
if
at odds.
they are at odds, the national level campaign, versus whatever you're going on in your
Such as
state.
on immigration issues, if you have a presidential candidate that might be at odds with a local candidate, that's what it's talking about.
When you go to Nevada, you're always going to talk about nuclear waste still. And when you go to New Mexico, I think the state, the interest, what you campaign to any particular individual or group of individuals when you're visiting and how you target those things, those aren't going to change.
But
the point is you're reaching more.
I'm being practical from a party building perspective, the down ballot folks and all of that. The hope is you're always tightly integrated. It's a well-oiled machine. Rarely is they put you hope for that. But this national or regional or individuals versus what's going on in your state, it just puts a lot of your candidates at odds with the top of the ballot.
But how does that not happen in a system where you already campaign in 50 different states?
Well, then I'll keep the system I've got.
But how are they? I'm asking how they're different.
I won't go with the devil I don't. So you're not,
If this is already how it works, how is that a criticism of the change?
I'm not going to change just for the sake of change. I'll stick with the system that I know. I have to have a good reason to switch.
Well, and then one of the other tensions that's part of this whole discussion is the values that we hold, whether the individual vote and one person's vote in one state equaling another person's vote in another state. That's the competing interest that we're talking about. I know the devil that we know. We all know the devil that we know. And if we feel strong enough about the individual voter's value, then we say, we want to know what this devil is that we don't know, because we're more interested in making sure the individual voter is encouraged, enthused, and participates, and that their vote counts, unlike in Maryland, or unlike in Utah, where it doesn't matter what party you are, it's a foregone conclusion who's going to win, and so whether you're Republican or Democrat, your vote doesn't count. I mean, it does, but it doesn't.
There's a little tinge of hypocrisy here, and call me on it, whatever, but we're trying to target and say that we want to promote the individual's the effectiveness of an individual vote, right? Or the implications of that vote counts for that one person. And yet half of your argument has been about special interest or minority groups. And so you're creating groups to support your argument. I mean, it just doesn't follow with me.
Individuals are made up of groups.
Yes, now, in both systems. That's
Well,
what
I
I'm saying.
think-
A state group versus an ethnic group versus a group versus a group versus a group.
Part of that is there was some discussion in one of the earlier meetings, I think it was the last one in fact, where there was this question as to whether or not the current system, the way the Electoral College works, actually enhances minority voting powers or minority voting influence. And so I think that's kind of where this was coming from, to say, well, frankly, it doesn't. What would is to get rid of the current system and go to a system where everyone has an equal vote.
I hear you, but the current system enhances states' rights, whereas this.
And we're gonna say that at states.
Right,
So-
but there is an argument to be made that this may not, you know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Again, that gets between that tension of what are the
Right,
values?
right,
What do we want to,
Right.
where do we place our values?
I will try to tweak this, given the comments, and people can sort of say their, vote on whether they want it. National popular vote encourages the aggregation of national voter interests over state interests.
I think I can agree with that.
Okay.
I think I can agree with that.
What did Maggie say?
What did you
Doesn't
say,
mean I
Mike?
have to like you.
Oh, you can agree with it.
So I said, yeah, that's true.
But do you like it?
Okay, that's all I had. So are there other things for voters that we would want to include in there? This is interest groups. Yeah.
Maybe you already captured this elsewhere, and maybe I'm just restating a point, but, oh yeah, you did, you talked about one person, one vote, right?
That's one of them.
Yeah, when we go back to that slide, yeah, that's, I mean, to me, that's the incentive to the individual voter more than anything else.
And that was the first one, yeah.
There's no longer a barrier between you and the president in terms of your electoral, in terms of your vote. So, yeah, tweaking that, making sure we have that sorted right. But otherwise,
Okay. So this is what I thought we got out of the groups discussion, that national popular vote will represent more interest than fewer interest, and that may not be, again, I just put these together on, when did we do that, on Monday or something? Fewer interest because it encompasses the entire population of the group. That is, the whole group has to be courted by the candidates instead of a segment of that population. And that has to do with what Kim presented about that. And you can really think about this. I thought one really good example might be that we focus on Florida as a battleground states, and Cubans have a very unique immigration process, right? They land in the country, they get to stay. And, one has to wonder how that, why is that? Why is there such special policies for Cuban immigrants? Well, maybe it has to do with communism, maybe it has to do with caste, or maybe it has to do with the fact that Florida's a battleground state, like we think that corn is so important to
Kansas,
to Iowa, and the
Nebraska,
nomination
Iowa.
candidate. So, that, I'm trying to address this idea that there's, Latinos are bigger than Cubans. And,
But again, if you're trying to convince a legislator, nobody wants to, I don't think people like to be lumped together. I think people here in New Mexico like to say, well, we're a little bit different than the folks in Florida or Texas or somewhere else. I just don't think people in this country are wired to think nationally on some of these issues. And I think it's much more, and to make it even smaller, you've got people in the House here and people in the Senate that have smaller districts yet that have different ethnic experience than people in the North or in the South. I don't treat any group sort of as a monolith. I don't see it working that way.
how do we capture this idea that, because a common theme was both Antoinette and Amber and Gloria, I think even you said it early on too, was that it seems that minorities are in states, in battleground states, and therefore benefit from that politically in terms of policy. And the data doesn't sort of demonstrate that that's the case. So there was this sort of feeling that maybe the battleground states represented certain groups, or a nation of groups at some level. So that's the point I'm trying to communicate, this idea, because that was a big concern in both the first and second meeting by several people. And so I'm trying to come up with language that addresses that or that clarifies that, and maybe I need to state the problem first. I'm not sure.
Well, it's unfortunate, we had the lady that was the tribal representative.
Yeah,
Amber.
couldn't be
And the lady, the attorney.
Antoinette from the law school.
That would be good to speak to.
Yeah, and we will, we're going to go talk to them about those slides. We're going to make independent meetings with them to make sure that we go over that information with them. So I'm just trying to figure out how I express that concern, because I think that could be a concern of a lot of legislators, since that was clearly a concern that people thought of. That it will, and that's why we went digging in the maps. Kim did all of that original analysis. Look at that
It
question.
seems like we've kind of come full circle in a way. In the first meeting, when Kim described the experience in Maryland, we have disenfranchised voters out there, yet we say the statistics show it won't make any difference, so that doesn't really matter. And I don't know how we can have it both ways. We as a group, we need to say this does enfranchise more voters. We believe it enfranchises more voters because, or it doesn't. I don't know how to deal with that. So if it doesn't enfranchise people, why are we wasting this time? What's the benefit? What does it improve for us in the system?
Where is your slide about one man, one vote? It was up there for about 10 seconds.
Well, we
and then-
agreed on that,
and
Liz.
it went away.
It was the softball.
To me, this is the reason why, if we're gonna go to national popular vote, we go to national popular vote. It's objective, it's inarguable, and it's not laced with somebody's opinion.
And it's inclusive.
And it basically articulates the whole thing, the whole fairness proposition that national popular vote is supposed to embody. And you can go no further than that and drop all the other justifications.
Simplicity, how would it be?
And that does enfranchise people.
But that, I agree with that statement, but I don't agree that, this is the best way to parcel out the votes from the electoral college. I personally like it the way that it is, because it does give, we're representative democracy, federalism, and all the reasons, a whole host of other reasons that follow from that. But, if you're going to say that it's a method of doing one person, one vote, I'm okay with that, because you're not saying it's the best method, the only method, or whatever else. I think there's other methods of having one person, one vote as well. And I disagree that our current system is not really one person, one vote. But you can.
Clearly, if you accept the fact that 181,000 people in Wyoming get an electoral vote and take 700,000 in New York, I don't see one person, one vote there.
Yeah, and I take a different, if you look at, again, we're a state-based system, I see one person, one vote there. But if you're going to aggregate it, it's going to look, as Kim suggested, different than one person, one vote. But I don't think anyone is disenfranchised. I don't think anyone is not being allowed to vote or exercise their vote or something like that.
But what the anecdotal evidence we've heard is that people are disenfranchised, certainly in certain states where they already know the outcome of the election. Either party, without ever going to the polls, you know what's going to happen in those states.
But they're